Hey folks, my name is Samir. So we're going to talk about how to reduce spend and improve efficiency in your AWS environment. So a little bit about CloudHealth. CloudHealth is a cloud service management company. What we do is help you track your costs in AWS and help you give you optimization opportunities. And there'll be plenty that I'll go through in the slide, and we can talk about it. We founded in 2013. We are by one of our founders. His name is Joe Kinsella, and our co-founder Dan Phillips, who's the chairman of the board. We started our Series A funding in March of 2013, and we've, up till date, closed about 86 million in venture capital. And as you can see, there's a wide range of people and companies who actually have funded us. Some of them include 406 Ventures and Kleiner Perkins, which was the latest one. We have over 700 direct customers, and we have about 2,100 plus channel customers to about 100 plus partners. We reached about 250 employees just recently. In fact, last year we've grown to about 275 plus now. When we're constantly hiring, our plan is to grow at least 100% or at least 75% over this year. Our main offices are in Boston, but we do have satellite offices in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., London, Amsterdam, and Singapore and Tel Aviv. A little bit about me. As I said, my name is Samir Mehra. I am the Director of Product Management at CloudHealth. I've been there since the last 2 years. Previous to this, I was at a company called VCE, which is a collaboration between Cisco, VMware, and EMC, where they did converged infrastructure. And just before that, I was at Sun Microsystems and Oracle, where I started my life as a software engineer and then moved into product management. I have an MBA from Boston University. I have a master's in computer science from Northeastern University, and I did my engineering back in Bombay from University of Bombay. A little bit more about CloudHealth. As you can see, there's plenty of logos over here that we are our existing customers. Take for example, Scholastic. Scholastic is an American online trade, public company. What they do is they use us for AWS, and they use us to manage their costs, track their costs. They also use us for cost optimization. And then I don't know if you guys know, there's a small company called Slack that I'm guessing nobody uses, but they use us to manage their environment. And then we have plenty of partners. The good one, which is out here in Australian region, is Bulletproof. They use us to manage their customers, and they use us to manage customers who want to optimize their costs. So, people moving into the cloud, they definitely think cost is a big deal. And many people move into the cloud to take into account cost savings. If you look at the survey that we just recently did, what's the most important factors? The few things that come up are, they like the capacity and availability. They don't, they can easily spin up resources. They use it for disaster recovery and business continuity. They help to lower costs of, ownership. The deal with spinning up, cloud resources is that it's relatively easy to spin it up. So let's take, for example, the multiple storage tiers that AWS itself offers. You can have a company that uses a recent, you have a storage tier where you can access that storage tier very often. There's a different pricing tier for that storage tier that you often access, and there's another price range for a storage tier that you don't actually access that often. So if you spin up a storage tier that you don't access that often, but you're accessing it really often, you end up paying more than what you think you would be paying for. So you have to keep that in mind when you actually go and spin up resources. The other thing to take into account is load balancers, VPNs, database. They sort of all become part of an appliance, And if you don't take into account and you're just thinking you're going to spin up an EC2 instance and you're done with that, that's really not the case. There are other peripheral factors that come into the picture when you're actually spinning up costs. So there's plenty of other things just rather than EC2. Like I said, like load balancers, VPNs, networking, for example. That you have to take that into consideration when you're spinning up an EC2 instance. Uh, to diving into some of the most common reasons, especially, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a list. There's plenty more reasons where your cloud bills may be higher than expected. One of them, let's start with the first one, not spinning down your unused EC2 instances. So let's say, for example, it's really simple to go spin up an EC2 instance. All you need is a credit card, go spin it up, and once you spin it up, you use it for a little bit, but then you're done using it, and you turn it off, but you don't terminate it. If you don't terminate the instance, it's still sitting over there. You're still paying for it. So it's basically, you have to take into the mindset that this is not your data center. This is not CapEx. Everything in AWS is OpEx. And if you take that into consideration, if you leave something running, you're still paying for it. Over provisioning EC2 instances. And if you over provision EC2 instances, what happens is let's say, for example, you really need, you spin up an instance which has 4 CPUs. But what you end up doing over the course of the month is just use 2 CPUs. Did you really need to spin up a 4 CPU machine? No, you could actually spin up a 2 CPU machine because AWS has plenty of options out there with multiple number of families that you can spin up, and you can optimally use the instance that you have. And if you do spin up an instance that is bigger than what you need, you're paying for that bigger instance. So it's additional cost that you have to pay. I already spoke about this, not choosing the right tier, storage tier for your workloads. And then automated scripts that accidentally cause higher transfer costs. So everybody knows about S3. This is where you can, add and retrieve data. But you also pay costs associated with transferring the data in and out of S3. So other than, if you just take into consideration how much you're paying for the S3 buckets, it's just not that. It's the networking costs associated with it for the data, you're pulling out from S3. And then we spoke about this not factoring in the appliance charges. A point to note over here is the fact that, okay, let me tell you a joke. I'm pretty sure everybody knows about this. It's a cliched one. Somebody asked a programmer, how many programmers does it take to change a light bulb? The programmers replied, none. Like, why? Because it's a hardware problem. The issue is that the issue comes down to cloud cost management is not just for one person. It's not for the finance team. It's not for the CFO. It's not for the CIO. It's for pretty much everybody in the organization, from DevOps to the engineers to the CIOs to the CFOs. Everybody needs to keep track of their costs because it is so easy to spin up instances and resources within an AWS environment and completely lose track of it. So in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about 4 use cases where you can actually look into and save additional money on your cloud services. So I already spoke about this, deleting unused infrastructure. So what are the common use cases over here? You forget to turn off the resources, like I already mentioned, unsuccessful launches of instances, and then deprovisioning scripts fail. So when deprovisioning scripts fail, that means what you have is you have a script that actually is going to turn off some of the EC2 instances. What if it fails? That means it's going to delete just the VM. What if it hasn't unattached and terminated the EBS volume? What if it hasn't closed the IP addresses? If you do that, basically you're going to keep spending on that because you have no idea that you haven't terminated those services. And like I mentioned, what are the common culprits? Unattached ABS volumes. Snapshot. Snapshot is a big thing. Unused resources. We spoke about this. Disassociated or unattached IP addresses. How do you fix this? What you can do is set up governance policies. And those governance policies, what they do is look at compute infrastructure, and you can look at an EC2 instances and find out if your max CPU utilization for a certain period of time is less than 5%. If it is, yeah, this is a good candidate to turn off that infrastructure. EBS volumes. So, like I said, if you delete a virtual machine, those virtual machines have EBS volumes attached to it. And if that EBS volume isn't terminated, you're still going to pay for it. So you'll have plenty of EBS volumes out there that you've spun up, but you haven't spun down. Snapshots. So snapshots is a thing where you can have a policy, and this really depends from company to company. How long do you want to have the snapshots? We generally see people keeping snapshots for like about 6 months. So if you have snapshots that are older than 6 months, those are great candidates to go delete because you have the data for 6 months. It depends if you have a policy which says you want to retain it for 9 months, that's different, but 6 to 9 months is how long you really need to keep the snapshots. And an example over here is there's one leading publisher, which constantly looks out for instances that have utilization of less than 5%, so they can investigate them, terminate them, and they figure out, like based on the data that they've collected, and they've told us about it, that they actually find one unused instance per month. And that can come up to a decent chunk of savings. How does CloudHealth help? So what CloudHealth has is something called the Health Check Pulse. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's broken down into 6 sections. One is your immediate monthly savings. There's a cloud governance piece. There's an operational monthly savings piece. There's a security piece, which I won't get into, and there's a reservation management section. We'll go into some of these into further detail, but for deleting unused infrastructure, if you look at the top left, that's where you see that we tell you if you have 2 IPs that are unallocated, you have 4 unused EBS volumes, and they basically come up to about $1,500 of savings, or I'm not sure. It's about $1,500. So that's one way of just and this report is basically, this pulse report is almost running every day. You can come to this pulse report pretty much every day and see the information. The other things then we'll talk about this next is about rightsizing. This actually tells you if you have underutilized EC2 instances. And then we'll talk about reservation management in the later section too, where we'll look at your EC2 usage and tell you if you can save additional money through reservations. So what's next? Next thing is rightsizing. So why is it important? As you know, and I mentioned this too, is that it's really easy to go spin up an EC2 instance. Let's take, for example, let's dive in, right? So if you have an EC2 instance, and let's take, for example, an M4 4 extra large. That EC2 instance, the M4 4 extra large, has 4 CPUs and 16 GB of memory. Over an analysis period, you determine that, and this analysis period could be the last month, last 7 days, last 60 days, depending on what you want to look at, you determine that you're really using half of the utilization. You're using half the CPU, you're using half of the memory. What can you do about it? Amazon has an offering which is called M4 4. It's M4 extra large, which has 2 CPUs and 8 GB of memory. You can easily spin down to that and save additional money. What we've realized is going from an original to a new resource is you can get up to 25 to 50% in savings. How can you set this up? Again, you can set up a policy. You can look at a policy over the last 30 days which sees if your average CPU utilization is less than 5% and your max CPU utilization is less than 20%. Pretty straightforward. You have to just set up this policy, and it'll monitor all the EC2 instances for you, give you a list, and you can determine really if you want to close it or not. We don't terminate it for you. We give you the visibility to actually terminate it if you think they're being underutilized. Example of an online imaging shared company that rightsizes 400 plus instances across CPU, memory, and disk pretty much every year. I spoke about EC2 instances, and this is a CloudHealth report. What we have is it's called a rightsizing report. And we look at your EC2 instances. We look at CPU, memory, disk, and network utilization, and give you details on how much you'll save if you go downsize this instance because you're underutilizing them. EC2 instance is one aspect, and we collect this data from multiple different sources. We can use the Cloud Watch metrics. You can install an agent, which is at no cost. We also integrate with Datadog and New Relic. So if you use Datadog and New Relic in your AWS environment, we can actually pull in those metrics. All we need is access to those metrics. In fact, sorry, there's another way. We have a metrics API. So if you don't use any of those four or don't want to use any of those four, but you have the metrics that you can provide to us, we'll collect that data and give you information on when and how to downgrade your or right size your instances. We also do that for EBS volumes. So EBS volumes, what if the read-write to those EBS volumes has been pretty much close to null? So that means your EBS volumes are being underutilized. There's easy ways to collect that data. You can look at the read score and the write score, and those become good candidates to go right size. The next step is automating to reduce your waste. So let's take for example, right? If you have an EC2 instance that's running 24/7, that really means you're running about 672 to 744 hours per instance. Your test, dev, QA, do you really need those to be running 24/7? When a developer leaves in the night or in the evening at about 5 o'clock, can you shut them off? Can you turn them on again when he comes back in the morning or she comes back in the morning at 9 a.m.? What about the weekends? Can you turn these instances off over the weekends? And if you turn them off over the weekend, there's additional savings to be had. So what it comes down to is if you actually implement all those things, your instance is really running from between 152 hours to 184 hours. And you can get a cost savings from about 488 to 592 hours, and that's per instance. And the reason for that is that you really have cut down your costs, or the amount you're paying for EC2 instances pretty much drastically. How do you set this up? Again, you use policies. We have policies that can help you automate those, turning off those unused resources. I mentioned this, you can spin down non-production infrastructure when you're not using it, nights, weekends, holidays. An example, there's one large publishing company that sets a target of less than 80 hours per week, which is saving them thousands of dollars. And if you really dive into this and look into it, that savings for, let's say 500 hours on average, you multiply that by, the amount you're paying per instance per hour, you multiply that by the number of instances you're running. And we have companies that run thousands of VMs or EC2 instances, and those cost savings really add up. How does CloudHealth help? So CloudHealth has an active policy management engine. So you can basically set up, policy rules, and you can have actions associated with them. So what we can do is, like I mentioned, you can find those unattached volumes. You can either delete them through CloudHealth if you give us the permissions to do it, or we can send an email that notifies your admin about it. What about snapshots? We have 30 days over here, but that's configurable too. You can set it up to 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months. And again, we can delete them for you, or we can notify an admin. Same thing with disassociated IP addresses. You can do that, like I mentioned, for EC2 instances. Those EC2 instances, this is arbitrary in the sense like it's for 1 week. If it's underutilized, you can terminate them. But you can set up a weekly policy, a monthly policy, even a daily policy if you want. So how does this workflow progress? You can set this up. This is a real live example that we've set up for multiple customers. So if a volume, an EBS volume is unattached for more than 1 week, we can send an email to Susan, who's one of the people who actually spun up that instance and has the EBS volume associated with it. She gives the approval. Then it goes to Bob. Bob's the manager who says, you know what, yeah, Susan's approved it. I authorize that this EC2 instance can be deleted. What do we do next? We can terminate that instance. So it's pretty straightforward. And what we do is the way you set up your AWS accounts in CloudHealth is obviously it's a SaaS. Sorry if I didn't mention this. It's a SaaS platform. You give us your AWS accounts. You can set up your AWS accounts through an IAM role or an IAM user. We'll give you an IAM policy that you actually configure in your accounts, and that gives us the permission to be read-only, but to take actions like deleting, we need your permission to actually go and delete those on your behalf in AWS environment. So it's up to you to give us those AIM policies, but we don't take those actions like deleting instances automatically. We have this workflow, but you can. So if you really want to set this up, you can actually set it up so that if a volume is unattached for more than 1 week, you can jump directly to terminating that instance. This is just safeguards we put into place around approvals and authorizations before we go and delete an instance or delete a volume. What's the last one? Last one is leveraging reservations. So let's talk about reservations. So what are reservations, right? There's 3 different types of EC2 instances or pricing schemes that AWS has. One is on demand, where you pay the full price. There's spot. Spot is basically, it's based on market availability. And then there is reserved. And reserved is you basically get a discount because you're making a commitment to AWS for a period of time, and they provide you a discount. Why reservations? There's a couple of things, right? Obviously, the savings is there, but you get capacity assurances too. So what that means is you're getting an assurance from AWS that when you want these EC2 instances, they'll have the capacity to spin them up for you. There are 3 different purchasing options. There's all upfront, which is pretty obvious. If you want to buy reservations or you want to buy, let's say, for example, you have 100 VMs that are running on demand. You're buying reservations for 75 of them. And that's pretty much what we say the coverage should be, about 70% reservations versus 30% on demand. So that's where your sweet spot is. You basically pay all for that reservations all upfront in one shot in the beginning. There's partial upfront where you can take some portion of those 75, the payment that you make for those 75 reservations and provide that. And then the last one is no upfront. If you think about it, and this should be pretty obvious, where do you get the best bang for the buck? All upfront definitely saves you the most amount of money compared to partial and and no upfront. There's commitments that you have to make. So it's a 1-year commitment or a 3-year commitment. So those are the only 2 options that you really have. And as you can see from the table over there, you basically, those are the discount ranges. We've seen more, based on on-demand usage that people have. And I'll speak about it in the next slide that I have. But really, why buy reservations, right? So the big deal is the cost savings. You get about 75% compared to on-demand instances. I already mentioned the reservation, 70% reservations versus 30% on demand. What you do have to do in terms of buying reservations, it's not a one-time thing. And that's really important to keep in mind. Buying a reservation is not, you can buy a big reservation purchase once, but if you don't keep track of those reservations and how optimally utilizing, how well your users are utilizing those reservations, you'll end up paying more because you're underutilizing your reservations that you've bought. How does CloudHealth help? Oh, sorry. Before that, we have one consumer travel company that is basically running more than 90% of their EC2 instances that are covered by RI, and they're saving millions of dollars. So it is a great way of actually saving a lot of money if you can make that commitment. So how does CloudHealth help? What does CloudHealth do? We basically have something called the AWS RI Optimizer. What we do is we look at your EC2 on-demand usage, and we can look at it over a period of time. We have several different options. You can basically look at it over the last 7 days, over the last day, over the last 30 days, and we'll evaluate how much on-demand usage you have and how many reservations you need to purchase. And you can purchase reservations, the standard ones or the convertible ones. And what we want to do is give you the details so you can make, what we want to do is give you the best bang for the buck. So your ROI, based on buying reservations or keeping it on demand. Like I mentioned, you have to make sure that you're continuously modifying your reservations to get maximum value. And there's plenty of, modifications that you can make for reservations. The bunch of them are switching, between availability zones. You can switch from classic EC2 to the newer ones. There's plenty of modifications that you can do, but the key point over here is to make sure that you're actually optimally utilizing your reservations. If you look at the picture on the right, what that recommendation summary says is that we recommend that you buy 416 reservations. And once you do that, you'll have 95% coverage. That means 95% of your EC2 instances are going to be covered by reservations. Your upfront cost is almost $600,000. You can break even that cost within 6.6 months with a savings of about 15%. What it comes down to is you get a monthly savings of about $41,000, and your annual savings come up to almost $500K. So what that means is, buying reservations, though it's a huge upfront commitment, as you can see, you basically save almost $500,000 by just buying these reservations. What you can also do is make sure that you have, you keep track of your underutilized reservations, because what you have to make sure is that like I said, buying a reservation is not a one-time thing. You constantly need to keep track of your environment. You can either modify your existing reservations, but think about it, if your business is growing, you're buying more EC2 instances or you're buying more reservations. And if you're buying more EC2 instances, that means you're running it on demand. So what you want to do is make sure that you keep track that you can buy new reservations. Your reservations, if they're expiring after a year, you need to keep track of your expiring reservations, because if you want those cost savings for the next year, you have to make sure that you basically have to have a policy in place that keeps track of the expired ones and when can you buy new reservations. The chart on the right, or the bottom right, what this is showing you is we'll show you how much your on-demand usage is, and we'll actually tell you how much reservations will cover it. So the lightish blue, the cayenne portion is the reservations that you're going to buy. The area above that actually shows you your on-demand usage, and we basically tell you how much your reservations purchase will cover. That is pretty much all I had. So keep in mind those 4 things that we talked about. Unused, deleting your unused reservations, or sorry, deleting your unused resources, right-sizing your environment, automating to make sure that you are not spending money on test dev infrastructure, and definitely leverage reservations. Thank you. And we have a booth right here. So if you want to get a demo, if you want to see everything that I talked about in action, please stop by, and we'll definitely be able to help you out. Thank you.